you're hearing that music, no, you're on the right station. This is The Real Side with Joe Messina, but today is Women of the Right View, where I get a bunch of conservative women in the room that try to make sense out of all the crazy stuff going on around us. Hey, real quick before I get started, if you're on camera, I got Chick-fil-A. Go read The Real Side. Go look at the website. I am supporting Chick-fil-A. I'll talk about it more as the week goes on. And then next Wednesday, it'll be all Chick-fil-A all day for The Real Side. We'll talk about that later on. And I really don't like what's going on with the reason they're being targeted. I'm not really happy about that. So anyhow, other than that, let's get back to it. We were going to talk about, Berta. I got to make in the chat. Okay, I'll introduce everybody. Berta, great. Yeah, the nuns kept me in line. Let me tell you what. If the nuns didn't have yardsticks and pointer, they use laser pointers today in school, and they don't hurt. The pointers that the nuns had, they hurt. But I tell you what, as I was yakking away and trying to pull the girl's hair next to me, when that thing hit me across the shoulders, I stopped everything. And usually for a couple of weeks. It was a couple of weeks before I fell down the wrong way. So anyway, so just so you guys in the chat room know, yes, I was hit, not beat, but I was hit as a child. And if I wasn't, my personal opinion, I'd be in jail today. But that's just me. Anyway, I'm here with the Women of the Right View. I've got Kathy Keller to my left.
Keller.
I know, but I was trying to... Kathy Keller to my left. I've got Andrea Nelson to my far right, but not really. and Tammy Messina sitting to my right. She is usually to my far right. And so we're talking about spanking and the effect that spanking has. And some of the recent... I'm going to say it. I know somebody's going to throw something at me. But some of the recent more progressive left-wing people want to say that spanking leads to mental illness, or it's linked to mental illness. And that spanking is also linked to lower IQs. And spanking is linked to...
Most liberal people? Is that what you just said?
Spanking is linked to violence. The children who are spanked are more violent than others. I mean, really, come on. Spanking is linked to the common cold. It's probably linked to socialism and communism. And we could have a field day with this. But I'll let Andrea start, because I know she's just chomping at the bit. So, Andrea, so you never spank, or you should never spank, or what's the deal here?
It's not something that I choose to do with my kids. And we were talking before the show, like you'd mentioned a little at length. So basically, yes, this opinion comes from my own personal experience, which I think most of us have opinions based on our opinions largely are based on our own personal experience. So I don't see anything wrong with that. But it's a decision that I've made for my family. It's not my number one preferred form of discipline. It's on the bottom of my list. I'm not going to say that I've never spanked my children, because that would not be true. But it is not something I do often. It's reserved for very, very serious circumstances. I will say that I have spanked my son for darting into the street, and I wanted to make a point, very clear point, that was not acceptable and that was not safe. So I did do that once, but when I grew up, my parents, that was the only form of discipline. That was it. We had a wooden spoon, and multiple times at a time. I mean, I had welts, and it was not only painful physically, but emotionally. I never understood as a 6-year-old how my parents could say, "Oh, we really love you and we're doing this because we love you," and yet I was still in so much physical pain. So I never understood that as a small child.
But as an adult, that's not right. That you don't just jump right to the beating. There has to be steps before you get there, correct?
And I think, absolutely. There has to make sense to a child there has to be consequences that fit the crime, that make sense. The consequences have to be expected. You have to say, this is going to happen if you do X. And then that consequence always has to happen if the crime's committed.
Okay, so where do you think that California, University of California at Berkeley stands on this? What would you think?
I would imagine that they would say it is always
no spanking.
bad.
Yeah. Sorry, wrong answer.
Well, she was right. I mean, if your child...
New study, I want you to hear this. A new study from the University of California, Berkeley finds no lasting harm among adolescents from spanking earlier in childhood. The study took more than 100 families over 12 years.
Well, I'll tell you that for me, that's not true.
But
I can tell you from my own personal experience,
discipline wasn't well-rounded for you.
That's not... Yeah. I mean, the way my even parents, I said this in the break, but my parents, now my mother has expressed that some regrets for the way that, that they disciplined me.
Yes, my kids don't listen, but if they were listening, they would call you and say, no, they knew what they were building up to, and some of them were smart enough to stop just before they stepped over the line. But they were willing to take the the not being able to do something with everybody else because they want to,
I think a timeout is really effective. And I've seen my daughter with my grandchildren, the timeouts, and I remember as a little girl, having to sit on a chair for like 5 minutes. And in my mind, to me, that was the worst thing you could do to me, is that I had to sit on that chair. So I agree with you. I mean, I really rarely spank my children, but you have a 2-year-old that runs into the street in oncoming traffic. How do you don't sit there and explain to them how dangerous that is. You have to react quickly and let them know, because you're so scared, number one, that they're going to be hurt, right? So I think there's a time and a place for things like that.
And I think you really have to understand your children and not say, and I think it's completely irresponsible of us.
Though?
But listen, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I think it's irresponsible of all of us to say that spanking is okay in all situations or not okay in all situations, because it also depends, and we know as parents, it depends on your children, and each child
But do you agree with the statement?
Differently.
Because when these so-called universities put out information like this, we as parents step back and go, "Oh my God, the university says so." So most of these studies say, no, you don't spank your children. So are you saying you don't agree with that? That there may be times
But there are studies that show the opposite, Joe, and we know that. We know that there are studies on both sides.
I'm holding one in my hand, too.
Well, how about if we just use some common sense and just say, these are
Kathy,
my children.
don't go there. What are you talking
You're gonna bring
about?
logic into the conversation. Nobody
what
wants
works
to play.
for one child doesn't work for the other. Like I had a daughter, and all you'd have to do is just look at her with this, and she was just, I would have never... I never laid a finger on her because she would be devastated. But my boys, sometimes to get their attention, or if there was my son's out on the roof at 5 years old in a 2-story house. Hello, get inside the house. And then I gave him one swat on the rear end because I was so scared. But still, I think that it's just use common sense. I mean, really, do you love your children? I think you should love them and be engaged, but you should be a parent.
Yeah.
You need to be a parent, even as adults. Your children don't want a best friend,
ladies,
they want a parent.
We're up against it. I'd like to share to you, what a psychologist told us about our oldest son, and it about killed him. But we'll deal with that later. You'll see the real side, not the right side, not the wrong side, but the real side. I'm your host, Joe Messina. We'll be right back.